tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, I do want to move on to regulation, Rushanara.
Thank you very much. So we've obviously already touched on regulation, and I just wanted to start off with Ian in terms of what specifically don't feel the need to repeat what you've said, but in addition to what you've said, what would you like to see in the secondary regulation that you've mentioned? Could you just talk about
Well, at the time, it's unknown what the detail is going to be, and it's always the devil in the detail with these things. So what we ask for is engagement with the community, subject matter experts, and furthermore, what we also ask for is when the current Economic Secretary of the Treasury announced that wants the UK to be a crypto hub, it was also mentioned there was going to be an engagement group set up.
Sorry, did you say the current? Or sorry,
no,
which one?
John Glenn, when he was in April, when he made the announcement that the UK was going to be a crypto hub, mentioned an engagement group. So we haven't heard anything about this engagement group yet. What we would ask for is...
I think he was briefly sacked or resigned. I've lost track, but he's back in post, I think, so...
Yeah, well, the current City Minister, Andrew Griffiths, it's under his remit to address this. So we ask for engagement from experts in the industry at that engagement group, which is going to be chaired by a minister, so we're told.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Well, in terms of regulation in the UK? Yeah, a joined-up collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Let's hire somebody to move across departments. The current regulator has, in my experience when speaking to firms that want to invest in the UK and create jobs, talk about the time it takes to get through the current money laundering regime and other licensing regimes that the regulator here, the FCA, runs. So we need more resource, more understanding, better training, collaboration.
So the regulator needs more, or...?
The FCA, our regulator, needs more resource, more understanding and more engagement, to be fair. We had one crypto asset sprint back in May. Yep. We call for more of these engagements with the regulator to help them upskill and understand.
Yep. And you've referred, I think you were referring to the 2018 Treasury Committee report. So what? Obviously, we asked the government to do that. We made a series of recommendations. So what do you think would have been helpful to do? Would it have been enough in terms of what we were proposing to mitigate against some of the issues that we've seen playing out more recently?
Yeah, I'll give you two quick points. Perhaps if there was regulation around trading venues or crypto asset service providers, we might not have seen some of the issues we've seen. And also, when members of the community came to speak to the committee in 2018, we asked for improvement in getting bank accounts for crypto firms in the UK. This is still a problem 4 years later. No crypto firm that wants to set up a business in the UK can get a bank relationship. So we need government to step in and support on the competition agenda and promoting UK business for overseas firms.
Okay. And then, well, obviously we've touched on last week's issues, but can I just take you to all of you, but starting with you and then others. You said so the recent estimates suggest that over 2 million people in the UK own crypto assets. In your submission, you said it's unclear if investors understand the distinctions between e-money, stablecoins, fiat currency, and legal tender, and indeed where these concepts overlap or diverge, let alone their respective advantages in the payments or for other purposes. So do you think that it's right that millions of UK investors are investing in crypto assets if, in your own words, they don't understand the key differences between stablecoins and fiat currency? And what should be done about it? So you start and then maybe others could come in.
Well, we believe that crypto and the technology provides financial freedoms and also financial inclusion.
Yeah. But you've said that there's a financial awareness or
yes.
education piece that's missing.
Yeah, advocacy and education is something at Crypto UK that we do a lot. We're the secretariat of the all-party parliamentary group for crypto and digital assets and spend a lot of time here in Parliament educating MPs and members of the upper house.
But we're talking about that's one thing, that's helpful, but we're talking about the 2.3 million people. So what needs to be done to increase that awareness and education, so people know what they're getting themselves into, which is something that's come up. Regulators have talked about it. Commentators have talked about it. Sometimes we've heard very senior people saying their children are very excited and animated about this alternative world for investment and so on. And they're behind the curve. So what else needs to happen? So there's a generational shift, isn't there, in how this stuff is working, and a lack of understanding, both among experts as well as, or so-called experts or expert institutions, as well as the public.
If people purchase products they don't understand, it never ends well.
Yep.
So I think to your point you made about younger generations, perhaps the education or the disclosures that are being made are not really being fully understood.
Well, who should be doing that? Who should be responsible for that?
It should be the same as any other financial product. The onus must go on the industry to make those clear.
Okay.
So advertising is something that's going to be bought under into the regulatory regime through the financial promotions order, where companies promoting their products will have to be clear, not misleading. However, this is problematic because a crypto asset company will not be able to advertise its products in the UK. It's a full prohibition in the current drafting, because the FPO, Section 21 of the Financial Promotions Order under FSMA, Financial Services Market Act, states that you have to be an authorised firm to sign off on your own promotion. That's fine if you're a bank account, because you're registered as a firm with the FCA. No crypto asset firms are registered with the FCA, so they won't be able to sign off their own promotions. So who will?
Well, I mean, the issue is that this committee has had to deal with financial, online companies selling fraudulent financial products. So that's one issue, not to do with your sector particularly, but one issue that we've struggled with, and it's come out of, some of these issues have come off the back of what we've exposed. The government not doing enough. So what do you think would work in your sector, given that what you're describing wouldn't be helpful for you, but on the other hand, obviously government and those of us who are in Parliament are very concerned about how financial products, fraudulent financial products, are being sold to our constituents, and they're losing tens of thousands of pounds, through the traditional routes, and we're trying to make sure that's stopped, because it's not on, and it's happening quite a lot. And what we don't want to see is your sector also being another medium through which this stuff happens. So what do you think should be done that's fit for your sector?
I think my understanding in their submission, the FCA acknowledged that their hands are tied a bit because they don't have authority right now to act in the same way that they would in the traditional financial sector to protect consumers.
Yep.
So including crypto assets in the Financial Services and Markets Bill, that definition, and providing the FCA with the ability to interject itself more forcefully in this space to provide potentially compensation for consumers who are defrauded, to require more ample disclosures than are already out there. The FCA has been forward-leaning in terms of noting for consumers that if they invest, that they could well lose all their assets. But certainly between the Financial Services and Markets Bill and additional efforts that the FCA may take on top of that is a good first step. There is certainly more that industry can do. I think to the point that Tim and Ian have raised previously, our concern is that we do not want all of industry painted with one broad brush. There is a lot of different
so I'm not clear what you're proposing industry should do. I mean, obviously this is a new area compared to the old industry.
We proposed to the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority, when they were pulling down, rightfully so, misleading and unclear advertising of crypto asset products, is the industry can strike a set of guidelines for our members, for example, to adhere to. This is something that Singapore, the Monetary Association of Singapore, MAS, FCA equivalent are doing with the community.
And would that be voluntary, or should it be legally underpinned? Should it be a requirement? Because I mean, the issue is not so much the good players, is it?
Yeah.
It's how to stop the bad actors from exploiting people and also damaging the reputation of the good actors. How would you propose that happens?
Yeah, enforcement through, say, a self-regulatory organisation is
what
possible.
Does that mean? You mean self-regulatory, so they self-regulate?
But powers are given to an organisation that regulates its members and has powers to act to enforce if they do not adhere to set guidelines.
Right. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Sure.
That sounds to me like self-regulation, which there's never been. There aren't that many examples that I can think of anyway where self-regulation's been satisfactory. It can achieve some things, but not enough, perhaps. Tim.
Yeah, I actually very much appreciate the question, because you're highlighting the fact that this is a lots of new technology that's evolved very, very rapidly.
Yep.
And what's happened here is something hitherto that's never happened before, which is that we're looking in hindsight at something traditionally when financial products and technologies have evolved. Look at the electronification of trading and PITs going to electronic exchanges. That happened in a manner where the regulator was able to take the journey with the industry and allow it to be regulated. This did not happen here. This started in 2008, and here we are in 2022, still debating how to deal with it. And in many respects, some people may have lost money because they didn't understand it, and some people may have lost money from bad actors. But what do? We have to empower the FCA, and we have to effectively use the extraordinary asset that we have in the UK, which is one of the most effective regulatory regimes and legal regimes that's used the world over, which has many tools that don't need to be reinvented in order to do precisely what you say, which is you can't stop bad actors. That's too deterministic, that's too black and white, that world will never exist. But those tools have been very effective over the years of mostly reducing that. We want to continue to empower that. Right now, what we have is a situation which pushes everything outside of the regulatory perimeter, and we now see what's happening. There's a fairly clear route to bringing everything within the regulatory perimeter within reason and empowering the FCA to do its job appropriately.
Okay. Earlier, when you were speaking, and apologies if I misunderstood it, but you were talking about some things that have gone wrong in the financial services. You made a reference to Madoff and various people. What I wasn't clear about is whether you were alluding to, your point being this has happened in the financial services, but surely we don't want bad comparable things to happen in this sector.
No.
So if we want to avoid harm being done going forward, further harm being done, and learn from the lessons of the past with other sectors, whether it's tech and the dot-com boom, and then it came back and bounced back, but now there are other issues around technology companies, of course, including harms, but lots of good things have come out of it, obviously. How do we do that? I mean, as a group of, as a collective, can you just talk us through what would be the steps to try and avoid large-scale harm being done before we get to that? Because it would be much more satisfactory if we could end up in that place. Just very quickly, if you've got thoughts on additional points around what we could do.
So most of if I start on the regulatory framework, so most of the regulation we have in place is consumer protection, KYC, anti-money laundering. We don't have in place any of the requirements around governance, about risk management, about potentially segregation of assets. So some of the things that needs to come. It needs to come fast.
Okay.
So that I think that's one thing. On the supervisory issue, in many cases, regulators, when they're sort of fulfilling their supervisory judgment, they need a rule book to apply. They don't have that. That makes it more difficult for them. They also need, as I think I alluded to earlier on, they need a little bit of help from industry. Some of these issues are very, very technical. The issues around lack of resources, etc., particularly at the FCA, have been well highlighted. they need industry help, right? I mean, it's just there needs to be a systematic education of the regulators if we want to improve the industry.
Okay. Unless any of you want to come in on this, I'm going to move on to a few other questions, particularly in relation to FCA. Is that okay? Great. So, do you feel the FCA's current anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing regulatory requirements relating to crypto assets are adequate, or overbearing, or inadequately lax, or about right? I mean, it sounds like from what you've just said.
Yeah, so I haven't heard any. So this isn't something I've heard a lot about. So I would say the fact I've not heard too many complaints means that it's probably about right. But there may be others who have different views.
I would say it's fine for the problem that it's trying to tackle, but it's too narrow in terms of its total remit. The framework that needs to be applied to industry needs to be broader, more comprehensive, needs to cover risk management, governance. It needs to distinguish between tokens and businesses, and that's the problem. Not so much that what's in place is insufficient, but it is capturing just a minor slice of the issues that affect industry.
And you're all agreed with the point that was made earlier that the FCA needs better resourcing to deal with some of these challenges, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I would also the FCA has been very forward-leaning in its engagement with industry, and with respect to crypto sprints, with respect to general openness to discussion, and we appreciate that. I think our expectation is that will continue, and it's been a hallmark of the UK government to continue that collaboration with industry.
Okay. Just a couple of final questions. So one of the written submissions we received stated that crypto assets are the most commonly reported technological enabler of economic crime. They provide a near-instant and pseudonymous way to make significant transfers of value across borders, at times with limited or no know your customer or anti-money laundering controls. This can directly impact individuals in the UK who are exploited by criminals using crypto assets, such as through ransomware or fraud. So taking this particular agenda, you've mentioned what can be done, but alongside what happened last week, this is very serious, this particular assertion about this particular field. How concerned are you that even with the proposals of, what you're doing as an industry, perhaps Ian, you may want to come in, alongside what you're proposing, the regulation should be made, that regulations and improvements to regulation and enforcement, that this can be, we can bear down on some of this practice, because it's not a very good look, is it, for this sector?
So that perception is out there. But I mean, these transactions
is it just a perception, or is it
reality? They're traceable. These transactions are traceable. So it therefore comes to the enforcement of that and the enforcement agencies. And that there is. I mean, I know we're doing this work in Canada, for example. There's a lot of work that needs to go on with enforcement agencies to persecute these criminals. But that perception is there. Fraud is a massive issue. But I don't. Just because the crypto transactions, or there being cases of people using them, I don't think it's probably easier to hide cash. It would probably be much easier to hide cash than it would to hide crypto assets.
Does anyone else want to come in?
Sure. Financial crime is obviously awful, and we as the industry don't want to see crypto assets as a weak point. And as my fellow panelists mentioned, on public blockchains, the transactions are open for everyone to see and verifiable. For example, we can backtrace the flow of funds to a personal digital wallet, and ultimately the exchange where the criminal will have to offboard their crypto, sell it into sterling, will and do, in most places across the globe, conduct KYC and AML. And our members, blockchain analytics firms, work with law enforcement and governments around such issues as ransomware to be able to trace, track, and in some cases seize assets that are stolen from economic crime activities.
But there are presumably some who are not doing that, which is why this has come up. Just one final thing. It's assessed that over £1 billion, again, similar, same source, over £1 billion pounds is laundered every year through crypto assets. This activity cuts across both high-end money laundering and cash-based money laundering through a wide range of laundering mechanisms, including use of crypto asset ATMs and over-the-counter brokers embedded within some exchanges. This activity damages the UK economy through reputation and movement of significant funds out of the UK. What is your view on assertions like this?
One of our members, Chainalysis, produces a report which examined the percentage of overall crypto transactions last year, and criminal activity, they stated, counted for less than 1% of all of the crypto asset transactions that they could verify to 100% accuracy on blockchains.
Okay, £1 billion is a lot of money, though, right? And if it's criminal activity that is around, serious harm or terrorism financing, or organised crime, or people trafficking, that's very serious. And I'm not saying that's just in this field. Obviously, it's serious whichever route it happens. Is there a complacency here about the dangers of money laundering in this sector?
No.
And should your sector do more? I hear what you're saying about regulation and obviously the cooperation that's needed to make sure that happens in a very relatively new field. But what can you do in terms of leadership to make sure that you bear down on this further? I recognise what you're saying about percentage, but it's still a potentially very harmful percentage, especially if it ends up with financing terrorism.
Well, nobody in this space wants to support that. I think that's fair to say. I think we've alluded to it here, but let's say it very clearly, the technology that underlines this entire ecosystem allows for a level of traceability, has a number of tools that can be used by regulators, law enforcers and institutions to combat this. This is up and running. This is not an idea. This is a very significant industry already. By the government allowing regulation to be applied in a way that would allow these tools to be used more broadly, that will counteract precisely what you're looking to do here. So these tools exist, and I think you'll find the vast majority of the industry to want to leverage that, because that legitimizes us further.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's in addition to applying all the typical sanctions and controls that keep us from engaging with individuals who are engaged in illicit activities. I think all of us at the table are subject to the same restrictions, which acts as a further control.
Thank you very much, Rushanara and Alison.